I thought I wouldn't have to make this video. I thought I could just go about my day, spread this theory around random places, and it would make enough sense for at least some people to agree. But time and time again, I keep getting mocked, humiliated. The only ones who agree are either my friends or people who already believed it. But out of all the criticisms it has gotten, there has never been a single smoking gun answer that can definitively disprove it. Everything holds up no matter how much you look into it. Nobody has been able to find a single true hole. But it sounds so crazy. It can't be true. It deconstructs so much about what we know about the game's secrets and meta-narrative, and believe me, it's almost hard to believe myself. But I do believe this theory is true, and by the end of this video, I hope that maybe you can believe it too. Hidden in the game's code, there is a collection of text under the class name UNUSED. For all intents and purposes, it's not actually unused. Unused implies it's some kind of asset that just didn't make the cut for the final game or chapter. But this was never meant to appear in-game. Its purpose is for data miners to find it. It is used for that purpose. It receives new entries every chapter, seemingly in chronological order. Its contents seem to portray a mystery character in a vast darkness, with no sense of the passage of time, no hunger, no need to sleep, no sun. The only stimulation they get is some occasional scratching sounds. The text is unsettling, as they call out for help while we can do nothing but listen. This character is scared, lost, trapped, and hopeless. In Chapter 1, we get this.
Where am I? Hello? Anyone? Is anybody out there? Someone? Anyone? Anyone hear me? It's dark. It's so dark here. Someone, anyone, if you can hear me, say something. Please.
Especially within the context of Chapter 1 alone, this is incredibly weird and creepy. Nothing in the chapter really seems like it could warrant this dialogue. The best answer people had at the time was that this was coming from Ralsei when he was being created. We know he's very lonely, and Chris and Susie seem to be basically the first people he ever sees. But this interpretation was soon called into question in Chapter 2. The text for this chapter is not inherently revealing about the character's identity, but we do get introduced to the scratching sounds.
No one can hear me, can they? I guess not. To be honest, I'm not even sure if I can hear myself. It's so quiet here. And yet, sometimes, I swear I hear something. Something like scratching?
What really gives us a better idea of this person's identity is the introduction of a new candidate. While this character was briefly mentioned in Chapter 1, we really didn't know anything about them until Chapter 2. This character is, of course, December Holiday. Dess's whole thing is that she's a lost girl. Noelle describes her in a way that indicates she hasn't seen her in a very long time. She freezes up when her name comes up in the spelling bee, and of course there's the song itself, Lost Girl. We see more of this with the Spampton sweepstakes with this red guitar alongside findher.ogg. She is the Find Her Dodge girl. Knowing that she is lost, this lines up pretty well with Unused. Also, I'm just going to be referring to the unused text character as Unused from here on out. And the evidence for Unused being Dess only stacks from here. In Chapter 3, we get the 1225 room, a weird Easter egg with a maze that's easy to get lost in. And in Chapter 4, we see her room alongside her red guitar. But Dess herself is nowhere to be seen. Her importance and relevance grows and grows with each new chapter. Dess and Unused definitely have enough similarities for one to reasonably conclude that they're the same person. I mean, nobody else in the game seems to be in a situation anything like Unused. There's so much going for it that the fandom has basically taken it as confirmed, and it only seems like there will even be more ties to Dess in the future chapters. Compare this with another unidentified character, the Roaring Knight, and that's still being constantly discussed and debated between several different candidates. You have the Dess Knighters, Carol Knighters, Free Knighters, Asriel Knighters, Rudy Knighters, even Kara Knighters. But Unused? As far as everyone's concerned, that's just Dess. But are they really? Okay, yeah, I've lost you, haven't I? Please, just hear me out. Just watch the whole video, and then you could type out your paragraph on how I'm totally wrong in every way and that it's so obviously Dess and I'm not making sense. Okay, we cool? You're gonna wait until the video's done? Alright, let's take a closer look into what we know about Unused. The Chapter 1 text definitely implies they've only entered the darkness fairly recently, at least at the time of them saying these things.
Where am I? Hello? Anyone?
I don't think you would be saying this if you've already been in some place for multiple years. They definitely seem to be confused and startled at the place they find themselves in. This doesn't tell us much, so let's move on to Chapter 2. Now, Chapter 2 is weird. And I'm not talking about the weird route. I'm talking about the fact that it seems to be the only chapter that Unused appears in some way within the game. Not their physical form, but their words. If you talk to Spamton about fear, he says this.
What are you afraid of? According to encyclopedia of be afraid. There's nothing to fear except... Can anyone hear me? Hello? Huh? What? No, I didn't hear anything just now. But it sounded like they were talking in yell.
Spamton starts talking about fear, and halfway through a sentence, his eyes turn to static, and we see him say something that absolutely seems like it comes from Unused. The Japanese translation is actually just a direct quote, which all but confirms this text comes from them. Spamton's reaction to this is strange. He definitely didn't seem to have control over what he said. He also says they sounded like they were talking to you. It's almost as if Unused managed to break through the code a bit and somehow speak through Spamton's voice. Something worth noting is that it doesn't seem to be a quote or snippet from something. When Spamton is quoting something that someone has said in the past, it's always in square brackets. This was speculated to be the case since everything in brackets seemed like it was pulled off of some advertisement, website, email, or something else like that. But this was kind of confirmed in the Undertale 10th anniversary stream, where he takes the place of Sans that one time. Take a look at this.
Have you overheard of the talking?
Money!
It's possible that Spamton could have just said what Sans said without brackets, but the fact that this is a direct quote from a character establishes that when Spamton is talking in brackets, he's taking the line from somewhere else. Except for maybe hyperlink blocked, which just happens due to an actual error. In the case of Unused words, there are no brackets, which kind of implies that it's being said through Spamton in the moment. Another thing Chapter 2 introduces is the scratching. Initially, it's very unclear what it means, but we do get a strong clue in Chapter 4.
The scratching noise I sometimes hear. It sounds crazy, but even though no one can hear me, when I hear that noise, I feel like someone's listening. Anyone, if you're there, thank you.
Since Chapter 1, we have always been listening to Unused. We haven't been able to respond, obviously, so they've just assumed nobody is listening. But this scratching is a clue to them that someone really is there, someone truly is listening. It's us. What really convinces me is the line, anyone, if you're there, thank you. They are thanking whoever's listening, and that listener is us, as a fact. I mean, who else could be listening? They're in an endless abyss of darkness, completely alone. So that scratching, it's us digging through the game files. It's us data mining. It's us scraping the code. It's no coincidence that all the metaphors that we use for uncovering hidden code all make scratching sounds of some kind. With this in mind, I think it's pretty clear that the scratching is coming from the data miners. If Spamton's reference to Unused is being said in the moment, and the scratching comes from players actively and currently digging through the code, we can extrapolate that the unused text takes place during the present tense of the game, and it's also unlikely to be the present tense of the game as in the real-world timeline of the chapter releases, since in Chapter 4, Unused states that it's only felt like days or hours since they've been in the darkness.
Has it been days? Hours? If someone told me it's been years, I might believe them.
Of course, you can't know for certain how long it's been, since they don't experience anything that would indicate the passage of time. Unused is even a bit doubtful themselves, but if anything, the lack of stimulation would make it feel longer than it really is, not shorter. So I think you can pretty confidently rule out the idea that they've been in there for years. And the current timeline of Deltarune has only really been a few days, so it lines up with how long they feel it's been. Based on all that, between the spamfin thing and the scratching and the amount of time they've experienced, I can pretty confidently say that the unused text lines up with the timeline of Deltarune itself. But this reveals something kind of unexpected. Dess is, of course, the lost girl. She definitely followed the pointed tail and got kidnapped by device_friend or something. She would fit so well as unused. And yet, if the text truly takes place during the present, it can't be her. You might think I'm going to say something about how Dess is the knight and obviously she can't be unused and the knight at the same time. I've actually seen a good amount of people claim that the knight is her body and unused is her consciousness, just separated somehow. That way she could be both characters at the same time. I've also seen a lot of people use unused as an argument for Carol Knight. Without any weird conscious splitting stuff, Dess can't be the knight and unused at the same time. But the thing is, it doesn't even matter who the knight is. No matter how you put it, no matter where or how you think Dess applies in the story, it is impossible for Dess and Unused to be the same person. Because remember, in Chapter 1, Unused had seemingly just entered the darkness, but Dess has been gone for a very long time. She disappeared when Chris still wore the horned headband, when Noelle was still a small child. She's been gone for many years. The only way that it could be Dess is if she was in some other place like the shelter or depth before, and then got put in the darkness unexpectedly. Except we know that even that isn't the case, because in Chapter 4, they say this.
Before, the sun came up, and so many wonderful things happened that made time meaningful. Things like breakfast or late-night TV.
Before this, the sun would come up. Directly before they entered the darkness, there was the sun, breakfast, TV, which, if this is death, completely doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, sure, you could force Unused into the past if you do enough time warping and other weird stuff, but the simplest answer based on what we have is just that Unused timeline should be taken at face value. And it's not like Dess could have disappeared twice or something. But if it's not her, who is Unused? There's not anyone else who went missing. Nobody else who's lost. Right? The internet outage is a very underrated point of discussion in theories. It's first brought up in Chapter 2, but we know it extends to all chapters. The reason we know it started in at least Chapter 1 is Alphys.
Staying up late talking to Asriel online again? Wait, you can't do that, right? I hope the internet gets fixed soon.
Specifically with the way she says can't rather than couldn't kind of makes it seem like the outage is a bit of an ongoing issue. It's been going on long enough that the internet is simply something you can't use. Chapter 2 gives the explanation that the outage cut off Queen's infinite source of knowledge and how after that she started being more commanding and dictator-like. But the outage is probably too big of an issue to just be for the purpose of making Queen a little angry. Especially since Mettaton and Alphys reveal in later chapters that the internet is still out. Hometown in general just seems really closed off. In addition to the internet outage, the only entrance and exit to Hometown is closed off. The way Alphys talked about the outage made it seem like Chris couldn't have just called Asriel on the phone instead. While there is self-service in Hometown, it seems to only function within the town itself. Okay, well, what about the television? We see Susie flipping through channels at the end of Chapter 2, and we even see a weather channel which is kind of dependent on coming live from somewhere. But look at what Tenna has to say about what he's showing.
Since a little while ago, all that I've been broadcasting is the same reruns over and over. I don't have anything anyone wants to watch anymore. I'm irrelevant. I'm junk.
Everything on TV since a little while ago has just been reruns. Which, sure, it could maybe be understandable if it was just movies, cooking shows, and such, but rerunning the Weather Channel, that just doesn't make any sense. You might think that the fact that Tenna is getting these signals at all is a clue that there actually is stuff coming from outside of Hometown, but that's not exactly how broadcasting works. the actual way that television works is a bit more complicated than just getting signals from a bunch of localized far-off broadcasting stations. The broadcast you're actually getting when you watch cable comes from a localized station within your area. This station then picks up signals that come into it and then distributes those out into different channels. If it stops getting signals from somewhere, repeaters will pick up the larger signals it has gotten and then just continuously replay them. I might be butchering this process heavy, but that's kind of what it's like from what I could tell. This whole television thing actually had to be both rewritten and re-recorded, since before I was going on about how the television is the only thing we get from outside hometown, but I was talking about this in the Soda Man Discord and found that no, the television also isn't getting anything from outside hometown anymore, which actually makes way more sense than what I was originally proposing, and I'll sort of get to why later. So shout out to Kitsy Fluff from Soda Man Discord server for pointing this stuff out. But why would hometown be so enclosed like this? No TV, no mail, no internet, no road travel, all stopping at around the same time. It's really suspicious. Well, I've seen some people suggest that it could be something related to the meta-narrative. Nothing outside hometown really exists because Toby or Gaster just didn't program it in, or something like that. Basically making hometown a kind of petri dish for darkness and prophecy experiments. But I'm a bit doubtful that this is the case, because Toby or Gaster were definitely at least able to put in some kind of past for stuff outside hometown. Like, we know that Chris used to be able to talk online, Asriel could go to college, and the repeating broadcasts had to have originally come from somewhere. I mean, the Weather Channel even has a human. As far as we're aware, Chris is the only human in hometown, so this really only could come from the outside. So I believe that the lack of outside connection has a much more important narrative purpose. But what could that purpose be? Well, it could be that there's something that the outside world isn't supposed to know about hometown, or something hometown isn't supposed to know about the outside world. There's only one thing from outside of hometown while still being in the light world that we know about, or rather, one character. Remember how the first mention of the internet outage was in relation to Asriel? I believe that's a clue to help us determine the outage's true purpose, preventing us, or preventing Chris, from knowing something about Asriel. I'm not the first person to come to this conclusion in some way. I've seen plenty of people hypothesize that Asriel has some kind of vital knowledge and that the outage keeps us from knowing it until the day he visits hometown. This works well in theory, but what kind of knowledge could he have possibly gained between leaving college and coming back? Or better yet, right before the internet outage and coming back. Of course, it could be something he knows more casually, something that he knew before heading to college and just feels like he has to mention when he comes back. But then, why wouldn't we need the whole internet to be gone? That just seems a little bit excessive. If he did know something like that, Deltarune could have just been written in a way where he just doesn't share it until we need to know. But instead, we get no contact at all with him. He and his college gets no contact at all with us. So it has to be something more important, something more unexpected. And I believe I know what that is. I believe Asriel is missing. If the internet wasn't out and the road wasn't closed, his college could just contact his parents about it, maybe an email or physical mail. But they can't do that. Chris could be able to call him online, and we would get suspicious that he didn't answer. But that can't happen. If he went missing, surely he would be everywhere on the news. But even if he was, hometown wouldn't know. No newspaper, no television, and like I said, no internet. There was no way for us to know where Asriel is or what he's doing. And I think you see where I'm going with this. Unused is Asriel. This may seem a bit far-fetched, but he really is the only option we have. Dess went missing several years ago, whereas in the time frame of Deltarune, Unused went missing very recently. So there must be two different disappearances, and nobody other than Dess is explicitly labeled as missing or lost. But Asriel's the only one that could be missing without us knowing. So if there is a second lost person, it's either him or some other character we've never even heard of, which, let's be real, there's no shot that Toby just wrote in a whole other character simply for the purpose of being lost while not being Dess, while not contributing anything to the actual plot. So yeah, if you believe unused takes place in the present, it kind of automatically assumes it has to be Asriel. And it's not just proven by process of elimination. Based on the very little we know about unused as a character, they actually do line up with Asriel in some ways. For one thing, we know that one of the things unused misses about the time before they went missing is late night TV. And we know that he was definitely an avid TV watcher based on the Tenna flashback scene. Sure, Dess was also a bit of a TV fan, she was there too, but she mostly seemed to be interested in music videos, like how she changed the channel to the music station with alligators in bikinis. So even when she was watching TV on her own, it seems it would be more for the music than the actual TV. But Unused also mentions breakfast as something they miss. Toriel is, of course, really good at cooking and baking. This is evident given how happily Susie wolfs down her buttermilk pancakes. Like, look at that face. It's just so pleasing. I don't know about you, but I think if I lived in the Dreamer household, breakfast would absolutely be one of the things I always look forward to. Compare this to the Holiday family's cooking. Carol literally keeps a katana in the kitchen because Rudy is incapable of baking a proper fruitcake. With Carol being the mayor, and presumably very busy, Rudy would probably be the one always making the food. And if the only thing we know about Rudy's cooking is that his fruitcake is as tough as a rock, I think it's safe to say that the food quality in the Holiday family is generally subpar. So breakfast doesn't seem like something Dess would really miss that much compared to someone like Asriel. While yes, Asriel is at college and wouldn't be having Toriel's food anyway, the nostalgia he would have for eating breakfast with Chris would probably carry over some of his feelings into college. But okay, let's say I'm right about this. Why would Tobias make a second lost character? Well, for starters, why would Tobias make the first lost character? At this point in the game, we just don't have enough information to answer some questions. Sure, we know that Dess went missing at some point, we might even know how, but we don't even have a clue why. Equally, nobody really had an answer to why Dess was unused. And so it's not like I need a narrative reason as to why unused is Asriel instead of Dess. But guess what? I'm gonna give one anyway. Something else we haven't really been able to figure out is the Knight's motivations. Why would they want to cause the roaring anyway? It seems like something bad for both Lightners and Darkners, but if unused is Asriel, I might be able to give a vague reason for at least part of the Knight's motivation. I'm a Death Knight believer, so this kind of is dependent on her being the Knight, but I think that Gaster or Friend or someone at a higher level than the Knight might be holding Asriel hostage to motivate Dess to do their bidding. We know that Dess and Asriel were very close. There was that time when Dess wiped Noelle's tears with Asriel's jacket, you can find his retainer in Dess's room, and they seem to be about the same age. There's also the stuff from Ribic about a lost girl paralleled with a crying boy. That boy is almost definitely Asriel, and if he was crying because Dess was lost, then that would establish that they did have a fairly strong bond. So maybe Friend was like, hey Dess, we kidnapped your boyfriend, make a bunch of dark founders and we'll free him, and then Dess is like, okay. It's definitely deeper than that, and Dess is probably being deceived in some way, but it's just one reason I could think of as to why Asriel could be unused. Also, it is kind of narratively cool, like a reversal of the knight saving the princess, where instead it's the girl knight saving the prince in a way. Like, Asriel isn't a prince in Deltarune, but he was an Undertale, and also Ralsei is a prince, and he's definitely connected to Asriel somehow, so maybe that's something. Okay, that was kind of a lot, and from what it looks like, it doesn't seem like there's really anything that can disprove this. But if you know enough about unused, you're probably screaming in your brain about the one thing that makes this theory a bit shaky. Let's finally address the elephant in the room, the Japanese translation. Now, Japanese is a really weird language. A lot of the words it uses can change depending on who is speaking the words. Like, you know how English just has the first person pronoun I? Japanese has like 30 different synonyms for I that literally mean the exact same thing, but just carry different connotations depending on your gender, characteristics, and the way you see yourself, for some reason. And in the case of unused, they use a feminine article, no. While this can be used by males, it's mostly used by females. And I think this Japanese translation is really what got a lot of people hooked on the idea that unused really is Dess. Like, here's the thing. It's not like Toby Fox even really had a choice. He could either use a feminine article or a masculine article, and each would be equally revealing of the character. And if you look at the original Tumblr post that started the whole feminine grammar thing, what's really happening is that Toby Fox is trying to make the lines as gender neutral as possible, but Japanese makes that basically impossible. Additionally, the style also matches somewhat closely to Flowey, meaning the Asriel possibility isn't actually thrown out just because it uses feminine speech. Rouse is already kind of feminine anyway, even though he's a guy, so in the case that Asriel is similar in personality and style to Rouse, I could definitely see Asriel using a more feminine-leaning style. But overall, I don't think we should be using the Japanese translation as a definitive source for unused gender. If Toby really wanted us to know that unused really is a girl, there are plenty of articles and pronouns he could have used instead that are more indicative of femininity. But given the context of unused, the ambiguity of its writing style, and the fact that Toby isn't stupid, it's clearly meant to be as gender neutral as it can be. It's just limited by the language that it's in. So yeah, that's my theory. I think I've addressed every counterargument I've seen against this, but if you have any questions or counters, please comment them below. This theory isn't me just being contrarian or derailing something that makes sense for the sake of it. It's just a huge accumulation of ideas that I've had over my ponderings of Deltarune. Actually, the very first thing I came up with was the Asriel is missing thing. I was trying to find ways to explain why the internet was out, and I felt like since Asriel was so important to Undertale, it would be similarly important in its parallel story. And that would only work with him being missing. I think I originally used that idea for Asriel Knight, which I never liked Asriel Knight anyway. That's just kind of where my head was at. But after realizing that unused is actually a separate missing person than Dess, that just so happened to fit the missing Asriel idea really well. And the more I looked into it, it just worked out better and better. At a glance, Asriel being unused seems like a bit of a crackpot theory, but the actual logistics behind Dess unused seem way weirder in force. I guess you could argue that unused dialogue does come from the past and is Dess, but then by digging in the code, we'd be indirectly interacting with that past Dess with the scratching, and then the Spamton thing really is just Gaster making Spamton quote something she said a while ago for some reason, and then you have this thing going on where we're somehow able to influence events in Deltarune that have already happened, and Gaster's trying to clue us in on Dess via a random cryptic quote with no name attached, which is honestly very much not necessary. We have the 1225 room, we have the Spamton sweepstakes, we have Finder Dodge, so why bring her up at that time in that way? Whereas with Asriel being unused, it sounds a little weird at first, but it's just as simple as he got kidnapped at college, he's now at the code, and the reason we get more entries each chapter is because he's just saying those things around the same time that the chapter takes place. That just feels way easier to wrap your head around. So yeah, Asriel is unused, not Dess. Deal with it. I don't know. If you liked the video, feel free to like and subscribe. I may or may not make more videos in the future on this channel. I already have 2 other channels, but they're all music focused, and I thought it would be weird if I put a Deltarune theory on the same channel as my cinematic percussion tutorial. If you do music production stuff and that sounds interesting, feel free to check out my main channel, Lightning Pig TV. Alright, bye!